Hello, I am so delighted to offer a bonus segment, a teaching. I pray that it'll be a blessing for you as it has been for me and for clients one on one. And really, just anytime this topic has come up, I have always had somebody benefit as I have. And I have the topic of this, as you probably see in the title, but the topic of this teaching is really focused on this last Saturday, um, the teaching where we got to the point of what limiting beliefs might you have, what lies, what just false ideas might you have about the character of God, about others, and about yourself. So we spent time in each of those areas. And this one moment with you, I really want to focus on that worldview on others. And as I get revved up in the teaching, we'll find more and more as to why it is an important concept for us to really think about. Now, I have in this, my ministry is called Abundantly Me. And so I've always been focused on, and the through line, the life verse of this ministry and of my life is John 10:10. The enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy, and Jesus came to give life in abundance. And essentially. And I focus on Jesus and Jesus in and of himself, what he has done for us. It is done. It has been completed. We just step in to that abundance. It's free, it's offered, it's our yes, it's an invitation. And I look at it as every day I am kind of recommitting myself and vowing to follow Jesus to have the abundant day that I want to have. And there's so much on my mind, so much. Like I want to jump into next week's teaching so badly. But this is a bonus teaching. This is for us to stay focused on. And you might want to get a journal, by the way, and take some notes if you're interested in capturing these thoughts. But I'm really trying to focus just on what might we be believing about others, about like what is our worldview. And in the abundance model, it's basic, it's pretty easy. And I love things when they're black and white and there aren't a lot of options. I love that. It helps me. It's either abundance or scarcity. Now, that's been something I've been talking about for years, and I have been blessed by that mindset. Am I stepping into this situation? Do I view the situation through that abundant, victorious, if you will? It's another word for it, but it's more of a synonym, rather than an exact match. But am I looking through the lens of abundance, or am I looking through the lens of scarcity? And that is attached to our belief system. And so the worldview really is attached to what we deeply believe. Now, I follow the work of Jamie and Donna Winship through identityexchange.com. That's their identityexchange.com or .org or whatever is their website for their business, but they've been mentors of mine since 2015. And I want to share with you what I have pulled together over the years and what they have added on to this list. And when we talk about worldviews, and they got this from other people, right? It's just people pulling together wise advice, wise counsel, and distilling it down, which is what this video, this extra teaching is distilling it down for you and I to be able to apply it immediately. So that's the hope. So I didn't have time to elaborate during the teaching. And so that's why I'm doing kind of a bonus teaching if you're interested in more of how I might be viewing the world. So there are essentially those two models. Am I viewing the world? And if you want, you can take a piece of paper and split it in half, and you're basically making a T-chart. And on one side is abundance, and the other side is scarcity. So that's kind of what we're labeling it as. Now, the Winships, through their research, they've decided not to call it scarcity, but a separated worldview. But don't hold on to that yet. So again, cut your paper in half, if you will, with a pencil, and make a T-chart. And on one side is abundance, and on the other side is scarcity. And and I'm going to go through different descriptors for each. Now, if you've done Abundance Academy with me before, this is not new information for you. But as research shows, we need to have things repeated to us 35 to 55 times before it's sunk in and applicable. Mm-hmm. So I'm not going to be afraid to repeat what I think are essential ideas. And so I'm going to start with abundance for a moment, and I'm going to just inundate you with information. And I want to keep this succinct, but if the Holy Spirit wants me to like elaborate on some points, I will. If you would like me to elaborate on some points, leave comments, and I will either do an additional message really quick, or I'll just type into the message and respond that way in the comment section. So the abundant worldview, another way of looking at that is that there's a connectedness. It's a connected worldview. And under scarcity, another way of looking at that worldview is a separated worldview. Now, the reason I do like marrying these two, abundance, connected, scarcity, separated, is because when we use John 10:10 as a lens, the enemy comes to kill, steal, and destroy. That's separateness. That is the goal of Satan, is to separate us from God, to separate us from others, and to separate us from ourselves and our true identity. That's the goal. And that kill, steal, and destroy could be looked at not necessarily just a kill, as in take our physical breath away, we are dead, no heartbeat, it's done. You can also kill an identity. You can kill or murder a family unit based on certain behaviors. You can be a killjoy. You can steal someone's joy, right? Joy can be stolen if we just kind of, for argument's sake. Time can be stolen. A legacy can be destroyed, if you will, like a positive lineage can be destroyed. Truth and hope can be destroyed and stolen. So it's not just the one way of thinking, kill means murder, as in death, life and death, or steal means taking someone's property, or destroy meaning destroying physical property. We want to elaborate. We want to see that in many different ways. And the ultimate sin, the ultimate goal of kill, steal, and destroy is to separate. That's the goal. So when we're dealing with a scenario, the question to ask is this connecting me or separating me? And I'll elaborate on this, more, and probably more over the month. But that is the goal. So I'll use as an example, and actually before I get into that, the reason that I'm pressing into this is because how we believe, it's no different than my belief system is the lens in which I look out into the world. So if I am, and let's even step back further, let's forget these two overarching worldviews, because it always boils down to either abundance or scarcity. That's it, one or the other. But even before those two labels, when I first ask you the question, and I don't know your answers because we didn't leave time for that, but when I work with clients on this, and usually they'll say, I'm scared. I am afraid of the world. I am fearful of the future of this world. I'm, if it's politically, the political climate, or just the healthcare system, or people in general, I feel like I need to be guarded against. I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. I'm trying to think of other things that I've heard people say. I feel like I have to self protect myself. I think I already said that. Um, I feel like there's a lack. There are limited resources in my the way that I view other people. Maybe it's competition. Maybe it's connectedness. Maybe there's joy. Maybe I think of community and friendships and collaboration. So, I mean, it's important to stop for a minute and think, what did you write on your list? When I'm thinking, how do I view the world? Because how I view the world, I'm going to respond based on my belief system. And when I am looking through the lens of, I'm going to go back to abundance. Well, then I'm looking through the lens and this belief system that in general, life is for me. There's plenty, there's more than enough for everybody. That there's, joy and, connectedness, if you will, and collaboration. And we get to create and innovate. And so when I have an abundant mindset over the world, then I'm going to probably interact and respond with an abundant mindset. I'm going to, moreover, let me say that even better. I'm going to expect, I'm going to hope for that, that abundant perspective, that resources are, the world is for me. Now, if I have a fear-based scarcity mindset and it's riddled with fear and there's not enough, we've got to we have to hoard, um we have to, grab what we can and keep it for ourselves. And by the way, you can teeter-totter back and forth. It happens. And when life events happen, then we really have, maybe we typically have an abundant mindset, but then when this pandemic happens, then maybe we step into things a little differently. Now, I would say that I don't feel like I shifted out of an abundant perspective. I think my abundant perspective blessed me during the pandemic because I continued to focus on Jesus. I continued to love the Lord with all my heart, and God was at the top of the mountain. He was at the top of the triangle, and the pandemic and disease and the COVID-19 and doctors and politicians was not at the top. Like, I refused. I was very, very self-aware. And that's a really good example of a worldview, and a really good example of, and I'm not trying to toot my own horn, I'm just giving a very, very transparent, authentic example that I do work at having an abundant perspective. And so even when something like a pandemic that was killing and stealing and destroying at all levels, I still held on to my abundant worldview. The way that I viewed the world, I still viewed it abundantly. Why? Because I had my eyes fixed on Jesus as the provisional God, as the ultimate healer who would guide me through in my family if we did or didn't end up with COVID, my prayer life, all that kind of stuff. So that is a really pretty on point example of, and you can use it for yourself. How did you enter into that global pandemic? And again, maybe you teeter tottered back and forth, but essentially you tend to land more heavily in one or the other. And I'm going to keep going down the list, but why this is important is I'm really making that point that it keeps God on his throne, no matter what, and even if. And that I can partner with Jesus through this. I can remind myself that I have the power of the Holy Spirit within me to maintain the abundant view of others, other people, even our enemy, which we'll get to, and how we deal with life circumstances and the world in general, just so back to that scarcity or separated worldview. I'm going to stay here for a little bit and I'll list some things off. Now, the four things that I'm going to list off on each are directly from Jamie and Donna's Winship's, their work that I learned from, but it overlaps just lots of books that I've read and other resources and other trainings that I've been in. But I like how succinct their work is. And so staying in the separated worldview, we have to be, if we're looking through the lens of separation, by the way, we don't have God on the throne. Something else we're idolizing, but that's past teachings that we've done. Excuse me. And we are looking through the lens of a false sense of identity. We're seeing it through a false sense of self. With that said, and I've already said there's that scarcity mentality. There isn't enough. So, what I tend to think when I'm interacting with other people is, now pay attention to this. When something's going well for somebody else, that usually means it's not going to go well for me, or there's not enough for me. Or if someone is in the line of work that I'm in, then you know what? I can't do what that there's already someone doing what I'm doing. If someone has blessed a family member or if someone's doing something well, maybe what comes to mind as a knee-jerk reaction is more of that competitive, um, if that person's already doing it, then I can't do this. If that person's already blessed somebody, well, then that kind of takes away from my life. If I intended to go do something and someone else did it instead, well, then that limits me. And so it's just this ongoing. And now remember, too, part of the reason we're doing the work we're doing together is not to solve the world's problems within this month, but to have an increased self awareness and intentionality so that we're more aware as we're noticing, like if we're on Facebook or Instagram and just any kind of social media platform, and we're seeing what other people are up to, and then we get to check in with ourselves. How does that make me feel? So start noticing, you probably already know, but start noticing the patterns of your thinking when something's going well for somebody else. What does that seem to reflect on you? And so that's scarcity. There's not enough for everybody. Or if, again, someone's doing well or someone was deeply blessed by something, you tend to feel like, okay, they're the winner. And I'm the default loser. Or, they're always the winner and I'm always the loser. There's always, do I have that somewhere else? There's always a winner and a loser. It's a competitive mindset. And another really important part of the separated worldview is that there has to be certainty. Now really pay attention. This can look like control, and it could look like I feel safer when I'm really certain about something, when I'm right about something, or when someone else holds space and they really believe that it's like I'm right, you're wrong. And if you're wrong or if you're right, then I'm wrong. And it goes back to that win-lose um, mindset. And when we're really thinking about our thinking, metacognition, we're thinking about our thinking, we're starting to realize, wow, I do feel safer in certainty, in answers, in facts. You know what? I am going to jump on the other side now. So, where we talked about, I had said scarcity and then now certainty. Let's go on the other side back to abundance. There's enough for everybody. There is more than enough. I'm so happy that things are going so well for you in all these areas. And even though that situation may not be going as well for me, I am not necessarily a loser. I'm not on the losing end or the short end of the stick. It's I am winning in these other areas. Oh, and by the way, if we stay connected in this abundant model and this abundant worldview, well, then what's going well for me can be complementary to what's going well for you if we're in community, of course. But we could also look at it as just, you know, that if someone has resources, there's more than enough for me to also have those resources. Now, I'm not going to spend a ton of time giving a lot of detail. It's really just allowing you to go, oh, I know when I can tell when I think that way. And you'll know more as the days come. You'll just start realizing it if you aren't already. And then again, following Jesus, it's not just that my needs are met, because that's a guarantee. And that alone is sometimes hard for us to wrap our mind around, that we are the ones who are providing for ourselves, or our employer is the one who's providing for ourselves. But an abundant perspective, being in the kingdom of God, we're always, always going to have what we need. And in the abundant worldview, there's that overflow. There's more than enough for everybody. We don't need to hoard anything. We don't need to, race to the top. So, and then going back down to mystery, which is the opposite of certainty. So in the scarce, um, separate world view, we had the scarcity and we had certainty. And now we're over in the abundant, connected worldview, abundance and mystery, number two, which is completely the opposite of certainty. So I have really appreciated this the more that I have increased my awareness. I notice in life this tends to be my natural bent, but I gave myself even more permission. More importantly, I gave other people in the world more permission to be themselves. Because if I held a little bit more loosely to right and wrong, and I thought, hey, you know what I really want? I just want to be a really good listener. I don't want to come into the conversation. Now, remember, worldview seems like very global, and it is, but it also means everything all the way to my belief system and just entering into a one-on-one conversation. So others can mean globally, and it could mean my community, it could be my family, it could be my extended family, it could be people that I do, life with in the community, often church people, others, as in the what apparently seems like people who are against me, not for me, my enemy, all people, including my best friend or my husband, anyone outside of me, that's others. And the mystery of life gives us so much permission rather than certainty. It gives us so much permission to stay connected, mostly to be able to stand in the tension and understand where the other person is coming from. Now, I'm not talking extremes right now. I'm talking about our everyday relationships, maybe some stuff that's on the news, but I'm talking about everyday relationships that when someone thinks differently than me, can I hold space for the mystery of life? For someone seeing things from a different perspective? Can I be a strong listener? Can I try to see where we are connected? Where do we agree? And then be okay where we don't agree. And, because life is, we will never have God all the way figured out. But in the separate worldview, sometimes what happens is we think we have God completely figured out. And that's where sometimes we get separated from him because we get disappointed. Or we have everybody else completely figured out. Everyone's on teams. Everybody's separate. Everyone has their groups and their teams that they're on. And we have winners and losers, and we have people who are against me, and we have our enemies. And that's just the way it's always going to be. But on the other side, in the abundant perspective and the mystery of life, we will never be able to fully figure God out. We will never, ever, ever. But we strive to know more and more who God, like the true heart and nature of God and the kingdom and in his kingdom, and in how other people and their deep belief systems, and not being afraid of the unknown. We want to be people of peace. We want to be teachable. We want to be good listeners. We don't want to come to the table with our agendas. We want to be able to hold our rightness loosely and enjoy the mysteries of life, the mysteries of the heavenly realm, the mystery even of who I am. I mean, the older I get, the more I discover. And quite frankly, the more I like myself. And I believe that's the same with other people, including my enemies. Back over to the scarcity model, the worldview of separateness. Y'all, this is where perfectionism, the fact that everything has to be perfect and failure is not an option. That is going to separate us right quick. That's going to separate us from ourselves, from each other, and from God. There is nobody perfect, just Jesus. For 33 years as man, he was perfect, blameless, righteous, and that will never be again. There is one man, and no other man will be perfect. So when we have such a tight grip and such control, and we want things to be perfect, now you may not have even thought this when you thought about how you view the world. I feel safer in the world. And by the way, my 15-year-old says this. I took him through a listening prayer exercise. Long story, but took him through a exercise, and ultimately he realized in the exercise that he likes ducks being in a row. He feels better when things have fallen into the right place. He just feels calmer. He loves mystery, but for his own peace and safety in his own being, he really likes everything fully understood and known, and that's impossible. So there, we may not even know this about ourselves until we have these kind of conversations. But if we feel best when things are perfect, when everything lines up, we feel safer. Um, and all of our ducks in a row. My behavior is perfect. I'm working towards, I only feel calm and feel good about myself when I've performed and I've shown up, or my house is perfect, or the situation is perfect, or until my marriage is perfect. And again, I'm not talking about extremes. I'm not talking about the extremes of any angle that I mentioned. I'm talking about on average, our children, our grandchildren, our loved ones, perfect, performing, showing up, perfect holidays, perfect gifting, all of it, y'all. I mean, think about the worldview, how much safer we feel in that thought of control and perfectionism. On the flip side, on the abundant side, the word is fallibility. And it is that there is a capacity, a beautiful capacity for error. Ooh, that lets us and that lets our loved ones and people in our life, the others, and the world off the hook. Nobody's perfect. So it really complements the mystery of life, but that fallibility, that ability to be able just to say that error is part of our journey. Making mistakes, there's room for error, that we are not perfect. It's the complete opposite. And then that again is abundant because we're focused on the being that allows us to be abundant. And the being at the top of that mountain is the only perfect, the only perfect God. Nobody at the base of the mountain's perfect. And if we really want this fullness of the abundant mindset, then we're okay with this fallibility. And then let's go back over to scarcity again. And that's the fourth pillar, if you will, the fourth aspect of having a scarce, separated worldview. And it's all about its self interest. And this one was one I held on to way longer. I didn't even realize how much, um, like, I felt like everything revolved around me. I didn't even know that that was my perspective. When I was out in the world or even in my home, I was like, everything revolved around me. And anyone who's ever done life with me, most often they would not be saying that I'm a self centered person or that the world revolves around me and my needs. It's not as extreme as that. It's that I am so self focused. Am I safe? Am I protected? Am I going to succeed? How do people think of me? I'm afraid of what people think. It all is either in a prideful, self centered way or in a false humility. Not humility at all. False humility. Like, woe is me. I'm not enough. I'm not good enough. I have a deservability issue. I just don't feel good about myself. I can understand why people treat me poorly. Um, I'm not deserving. All of that is still self interest. It's still self focused, no different than it's a complete opposite end, but it's still self focused, where pride is the opposite of like, it's all about me. And without me, everything would fall apart. And I'm going to step on people to get where I need to go. I'm going to use people. I'm better than everybody. It's the complete opposite of humility. So when we're really self-interested, it's all about me, my narrative. I'm thinking about myself. I'm thinking about how these circumstances impact me. I'm thinking about who I'm going to be when I show up in the world today. I'm just overthinking about me. I mean, I remember when I had a wake up call and I just noticed, I'm like, wow, I'm always kind of centering things around me and how things, and it's like, it's such a slippery slope. But I found that, man, I was really slipping into so much self-centeredness by the way of false humility. Woe is me. I don't want to make it about me. I don't, and that's not authentic living. Where on the other side of the worldview, the complete opposite worldview and abundance is that it's really about the common good. It's about when I'm showing up. And abundance, by the way, is in our true identity. Remember, I told you at the top of the session that scarcity um, is a false identity, right? It's disconnected from the truth of who I am. It's the false sense of self and identity, which probably is really the reason we make it so much about ourselves. But in the abundant worldview, in the connected worldview, I'm connected with the truth of who I am and how God sees me. And so I can enter into the world thinking the world needs more of the truth of who Tara is, which is a rock. That's kind of like that true identity. And we in this course will, if you haven't already, we're going to learn who God says you are. And so when we show up in the world with just this surrendered life and just very humble, we are showing up, head held high, shoulders back, in the truth in my identity, which is not just Tara, but it is a rock. And God calls me rock upon which much is built, like foundation. Hold true to those values no matter what and even if. And that is not being prideful. That's being confident in who God says I am, showing up no matter what and even if. And when I show up fully in my true identity, it benefits others. When I hide who I am, false humility, self-interested, because I'm afraid of what they're going to think. I don't want to be this, that, or the other thing in that group. No, the group really needs the truth of who you are. They're waiting for you. They're waiting, your family, your marriage, your children, your friend community, your church community, your business, whatever you do. They're waiting for the true you, not to hide that. But that is good that's the common good. That's good for this world. And so common good it's about the good of the community. It's not about me, essentially. So when we are journeying on this side of heaven, while we are working towards death, I mean, all of us are going to die. So not to complicate the triangle model, but we are climbing up towards heaven. That's a way of looking at this diagram is we're climbing our mountain of life and we're working our way towards heaven. I mean, we're all in this dying process. I sure don't want to be going the other way. And I sure don't want to believe that this is all there is. And so, this concept of while I'm journeying with all these other people, I want to stay connected with them. I don't want to be afraid of them. Nobody's greater than me, nobody's lesser than me. Mostly when we're all, I mean, wouldn't it be a beautiful place if we're all showing up in our true identity? Well, then no one's greater and less than because everyone's showing up in their truth. And the common good of the community, of the whole, at the base of this mountain, is that everybody's showing up and sharing resources and the give and take. And your win is my win. Your loss is my loss. And we're working on this together. And quite frankly, anytime that we've had setbacks, anytime that there have been failures, we've been able to fail forward. We've been able to learn from it. We are helping each other along. We're on journey together. And so that is why it's really very, very, very important that we know what our model, like our worldview is. Our worldview is a direct correlation to the belief system within. One of my favorite, and I had a tug of war, like love and hate relationship with this scripture, but it is one of my favorites, and it's James 4:1. And essentially it's saying, hey, because there's conflict going on around. I mean, so much of the Bible doesn't hide the fact that they're in the middle of so much conflict. And James in chapter 4, verse 1 says, hey, isn't it true though that when there's conflict outside, it's really about the conflict inside? And that goes back to my pandemic example. There was so much conflict externally, but you guys, I didn't have any conflict internally. And so I got to show up I got to maintain my abundant worldview, even though in the natural, it felt like anything but abundant. But I'm not of this world. I'm not in this world. My eyes are fixed. I'm in the kingdom of God. Global pandemic. Yup. It's conflict happening all around me. And sometimes in me, if I had COVID, or sometimes in my family, if we were dealing with how to handle COVID multiple times. The conflict's real in the natural. It's real. But because I fixed my eyes on Jesus the entire time, I got it didn't change who I am, and it didn't change the fact that I got to show up for the common good of my own being, my marriage, my family dynamic, friends nearby, and ultimately, if you guys know me through Barn 45 Bible study, we got to positively impact people at a global level because we had an abundant mindset. I felt abundant eternally, internally, and I have an eternal mindset. God was always on the throne during the pandemic. And so I got to positively be an impact for the good, for the common good. I got to notice the fallibility of others. I didn't hold everyone to such high standards and to respond so perfectly. I was okay in the mystery and actually in awe over the mystery of what was going on and um and just keep learning more about the kingdom of God during this time. And I just got to see that, you know what, it's okay. And literally, when there wasn't enough for everybody, that whole toilet paper, stealing it, grabbing more than I need because I'm going to hoard it because I'm afraid. And then we realized, wow, we really always had everything we needed. Again, I'm not getting into all the extremes and all the different yeah buts. I'm giving an example, a global example of how important it is to notice what our worldview is. And I am not shaming or applying guilt to anybody who may have responded completely differently and felt, rather than connected during the pandemic, felt incredibly scarce mindset, lots of disconnection, lots of separateness, lots of like just this thought of like, this is not ideal, this is not perfect, I'm not comfortable in this, I feel so out of control, I feel so isolated, I don't like this because I'm not certain about anything and it's making me spiral out of control. I like certainty. And remember, hear all that language, it's I. And so I am definitely not using this bonus session to make you feel bad about how you responded. But let's use that time. Let's use other opportunities, even how we're showing up in life this week. Just decide in this moment how I responded to that. Wow, that must show me, or excuse me, that showed me that I saw that from a scarce, separate perspective. Wow, okay. I saw that with an abundant mindset. I saw that I kept connected. A quick another example about the connectedness and the separateness. It's super, super important. I'm raising 3 kids and I have a marriage. So there's 4 different, plus myself, but there's 4 human dynamics. I've a relationship with my husband and my 3 kids. I have a relationship with the Trinity. I have a relationship with myself. I mean, in my own household, there's these, 6 dynamics of these. Man, I'm getting, I don't know, allergies or something at this time of night, but I feel very different. But all these different relationships, and each time there's a problem and there needs to be like a solution, we have to press into something and stand in the tension of a problem. It gives me an opportunity to say, I want to have this abundant mindset. And so I want to make sure the person, right? This is the other. I want to make sure I put the person above the problem. I don't want to separate from the person and use the problem to wedge us, to separate us. Again, I'm not talking about extreme scenarios because that doesn't fit into this conversation. I'm talking about the everyday relationships and just overall worldview. Obviously, I brought up the pandemic, but I think you get my point. But when it comes to relationships with others, when we are dealing with problems or conflict, back to James 4:1, we get to stay connected. And then my husband and I realized over the years, we're like, wow, if we handle this quite abundantly and have that abundant worldview, we actually don't ever have to be afraid of a problem again. Because if we step into the problem with an abundant perspective, then the problem can draw us closer. That's always been our goal, mostly raising 3 teenagers, but also in our marriage. We're not going to let this hiccup, we're not going to let this financial issue, we're not going to let what an in-law said to separate us, because if we do, then we know we're in a scarcity model. That view of scarcity, right? We want to put the lens of abundance on when we're pressing in to the problem. We want to be intentional. Like, even if you have to be silly and say it in your own mind, like, oh, I better wear the lens of love. I better wear the lens of connectedness. I better wear the lens of relationship. And there's more than enough for everybody. And people make mistakes and I want to stay connected and I want to focus on the common good, right? We want to be able to start using or continue to use or sharpen this language, this tool that we have. So, to close that part of it up, when I have an abundant worldview, an abundant view of how I show up and respond in the world, well, then that means I want to take any scenario, any outside conflict, and I want to allow that to not pull us apart and be a wedge, push us apart and be a wedge, but to draw us closer together. So we could, I mean, books are written on this. We could talk about this for a super long time, but however long you were able to listen in to this, I hope it was a blessing for you. Um, I think I have some other notes, but I think I covered everything that I wanted to. Um, I feel like there was something I was saying about conflict. Even when we feel conflict within ourselves, nah, I don't need to get into that. That's a whole other tangent. But all right, so all of this connects to the fact that we are trying to get in a habit and create a pathway in our brain of that mountainous triangular, the Trinity view. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, strength. Love others as you love yourself. And so when we really press in more specifically in this hour to these details of loving each of these pieces through either an abundant lens or a scarcity separate lens. Let me say that better. Through loving the Lord your God, love others as you love yourself through an abundant perspective or through a scarcity perspective. We want to be much more self-aware and intentional. It makes a huge difference. And because I know this work so much, I can filter so many conversations and I hear how easy it is to slip into a scarcity model, which is really, got to be honest, the majority of people on a regular basis are in this scarcity model and they don't even know it. We don't even know it. I know it. I do this work. I live this work. It is what God's allowed me to be very aware of. But I very much can tell when I slip out and I do into this scarcity model. And that's why, I'm pretty straightforward and vulnerable and I confess it out as soon as I recognize, oops, I slipped into scarcity. Here are the lies. Here's the limiting beliefs. Here are some fears. And then I confess it out and I feel like I have that Kairos like moment. I have a heart posture, my heart and my mind changes, and then I get back on course into abundance. So it's an ongoing process. It's just an opportunity for us to, just work on that language, work on our belief system, and then we get to show up no matter what and even if abundantly. All right. I hope this session blessed you and have a great rest of your week. Bye.